Have you ever wondered if God has forgotten about you? Have you ever looked at your life, the struggles, the setbacks, the silence, and asked yourself, am I even on His radar? Have you ever felt like you're fighting battles no one sees, carrying burdens no one understands, and God Himself has turned His face away? Let me tell you something that's going to shake you to your core. God hasn't forgotten you. He's been watching every tear, every prayer you whispered in the dark, every moment you wanted to quit but didn't. And right now, right this second, His heart is overwhelmed with satisfaction because of you. I know that sounds impossible, especially when you've been walking through hell, especially when it feels like everyone else is blessed while you're barely surviving. But here's the truth they don't tell you in church. Sometimes the ones God is most pleased with are the ones who feel most abandoned. You're not here by accident. This message found you because heaven orchestrated it. God Himself led you to these words because today, not tomorrow, not next week, today is your moment of confirmation. Listen, I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes for just a second. Think about one moment, just one, when you felt God move in your life. Maybe it was years ago. Maybe it was yesterday. Hold that moment. Feel it. Because what you're about to hear is going to resurrect that feeling and multiply it 1,000 times over. Before we dive deeper, I need to acknowledge something. To everyone who supported this message through, super. Thanks, your generosity touches heaven itself. You're not just giving. You're sowing seeds into a movement that's reaching people in their darkest hours. Whether you can give or not, I'm grateful you're here. Your presence, your time, your heart, it all matters. And if this word is already stirring something inside you, go ahead and type 777 in the comments right now. That's not just a number. That's your declaration that you're ready to receive what God has been holding for you. See, here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. You didn't just survive. You touched the heart of God while you were suffering. While you were crying, He was crying with you. While you were fighting, He was recording every battle. And now He's about to show you why it all mattered. This isn't motivation. This is a revelation. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you're going to understand something that will change how you see yourself, how you see your pain, and how you see your future. You ready? Let's go. Why do you think you've suffered more than everyone around you? Why does it feel like while others coast through life with ease, you've been handed trial after trial, test after test, as if God Himself placed a target on your back? Why have you been marked with pain that others will never understand? I'll tell you why. And this truth is going to break open everything you thought you knew about your identity. You weren't given a harder path because God is punishing you. You were given a harder path because God is preparing you. There's a reason the Bible says in 1 Peter 2:9, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Notice that word, chosen. Not everyone gets chosen. Not everyone gets set apart. The moment you accepted that calling, whether you realized it or not, you stepped out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. And extraordinary lives don't come with ordinary struggles. Let me paint you a picture. Think about gold. Before it becomes that beautiful shining treasure everyone desires, it has to go through fire. Intense, blistering, unrelenting heat. The impurities are burned away. The dross is removed. What's left, pure gold. That's what's happening to you right now. Every hardship, every betrayal, every moment you felt abandoned, that was the fire. And God was standing there the entire time, watching, waiting, refining you into something the world has never seen before. You see, most people want the blessing without the burden. They want the crown without the cross. They want the anointing without the assignment. But that's not how God operates with His chosen ones. When He calls you, He doesn't just hand you a title and send you on your way. No, He strips you down. He breaks you. He isolates you. Why? Because what He's about to do through you is too powerful to be carried by someone who's still attached to the world's approval. Look at Moses, chosen to deliver an entire nation. But before he could lead millions out of bondage, he spent 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. 40 years of obscurity. 40 years of silence. Can you imagine? The man who would part the Red Sea had to first learn to wait in the desert. That wasn't wasted time. That was preparation. That was God saying, I'm going to use you for something so great that I need to make sure you're strong enough to carry it. Look at David, a shepherd boy. The youngest, the overlooked, the one nobody believed in. But God saw something different. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." David wasn't chosen because he was the strongest or the smartest. He was chosen because his heart was aligned with God's. And even after he was anointed king, he didn't step into that role immediately. He spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves, fighting battles nobody cheered for. All of that was shaping him into the king God needed him to be. You want to know why your life has been so hard? Because you're being shaped into royalty. You're being trained for a kingdom assignment. And kingdom assignments require kingdom preparation. Here's where it gets real. Right now, at this very moment, you're in one of two places. Either you're in the fire being refined, or you're in the wilderness being positioned. And I know, God, I know it feels unbearable. It feels like too much. It feels like if one more thing goes wrong, you're going to break. But here's the truth that's going to anchor your soul. God doesn't waste pain. Every tear you've cried has been stored. Every prayer you've whispered in desperation has been heard. And every wound you've endured has a purpose. Psalm 56:8 says, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." Did you catch that God isn't ignoring your pain? He's documenting it. He's keeping a record. Why? Because one day, He's going to turn every bit of that suffering into testimony. One day, people are going to look at your life and say, "How did they make it through that?" And you'll point them to the God who carried you. But let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. Are you still trying to be chosen? Or have you accepted that you already are? Because here's the trap. A lot of people spend their entire lives trying to prove they're worthy of God's calling. They hustle, they strive, they perform. They think if they just do enough, pray enough, sacrifice enough, then maybe, just maybe, God will finally notice them. But that's backwards. You don't earn the calling. The calling chose you before you were even born. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." You were chosen before your first breath. You were marked before your first step. You were anointed before your first struggle. So, stop trying to convince God you're worthy. He already decided that a long time ago. Now here's where the tension rises. Because being chosen doesn't mean life gets easier. In fact, it means the opposite. The more anointed you are, the more attacked you'll be. The more favor you carry, the more opposition you'll face. Jesus himself said in John 15:19, "If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you." You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. And that's exactly why you felt so isolated, so misunderstood, so different your entire life. So let me ask you one final question that's going to set the stage for everything coming next. If you're chosen, and you are, what are you going to do with it? Because understanding your calling is only the beginning. Now comes the part where you step into it. How many nights have you laid awake, tears soaking your pillow, asking God why He allows you to suffer while everyone else seems blessed? How many times have you watched others celebrate victories you prayed for but never received? How many battles have you fought in complete silence with no one to witness your pain? No one to validate your struggle, wondering if God Himself had turned His back on you. You've been through the shit, haven't you? And I'm not talking about some minor inconvenience. I'm talking about the kind of fire that strips everything away. The kind that burns so hot you couldn't recognize yourself anymore. The kind that made you question whether you'd even survive. You felt abandoned, overlooked, forgotten. Like you were screaming into a void and heaven had gone silent. But let me tell you what was really happening in those moments. God was forging you into a weapon the enemy can never destroy. Romans 5:3-4 tells us, "We also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." Read that again. Suffering produces. It's not just random pain. It's purposeful refinement. Every trial you endured wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to build you. And the reason it hurt so much is because God was removing everything in you that couldn't carry what He's about to release. Think about Job, a man who lost everything. His wealth, his children, his health. He sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, and even his own wife told him to curse God and die. His friends accused him of hidden sin. He had every reason to quit, every reason to walk away. But Job 23:10 records his declaration, "But He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Job understood something most people never grasp. The fire wasn't his punishment. It was his promotion. And when God finally spoke, He didn't just restore Job. He doubled everything Job had lost. Not because Job was perfect, but because Job endured. Because Job refused to let go of God, even when God seemed silent. Now think about Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison for years, forgotten by people he helped. Can you imagine the loneliness, the bitterness that could have consumed him? But Genesis 50:20 shows us Joseph's revelation. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Every betrayal, every injustice, every year in that prison, it was all positioning him to save a nation. God wasn't absent. God was orchestrating. And then there's Jesus, the Son of God himself. If anyone should have been exempt from suffering, it was him. But Isaiah 53:3 describes him as a man of suffering and familiar with pain. He was rejected by his own people, betrayed by one of his closest friends, abandoned by everyone when he needed them most. He hung on a cross bleeding, suffocating, crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Even Jesus felt forsaken. Even the chosen one of all chosen ones walked through the valley of abandonment. But here's what you need to understand. It was in that moment of absolute agony, in that moment of complete surrender, that Jesus accomplished the greatest victory in human history. The resurrection didn't happen in comfort. It happened after the crucifixion. Your breakthrough isn't going to come from an easy path. It's going to come from the hardest season you've ever walked through. So let me ask you something that's going to shake you. What if every person who hurt you was actually positioning you? What if every door that slammed in your face was God redirecting you? What if every loss you suffered was clearing space for something greater? What if the very things that felt like they were destroying you were actually the exact tools God was using to build you? Because here's the beautiful, devastating, powerful truth that most people never discover. It was in your darkest moments that you touched God's heart the most. When you were crying in that empty room, God was weeping with you. When you felt completely alone, God was holding you closer than ever. When you thought He had abandoned you, He was actually satisfying His heart with your faithfulness. God isn't satisfied with shallow devotion. He's satisfied with those who love Him, even when it costs everything. He's satisfied with those who worship Him, even in the wilderness. He's satisfied with those who trust Him, even when they can't see the way forward. And that's you. Right now, reading these words, you have touched the heart of God with your endurance. So I want you to do something right now. Think about one trial that nearly destroyed you, one moment where you almost gave up. Hold that memory, feel it. Now ask yourself this: did God bring me through it? And if He brought you through that, what makes you think He won't bring you through what's coming next? Drop a comment right now and share one trial that shaped you. Let's build each other up, because your story isn't just yours, it's someone else's hope. But here's what you need to know before we go any further. The struggle wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And what God is about to do next is going to make every tear worth it. When was the last time you chose to obey God, even though everything inside you screamed to do the opposite? When was the last time you said yes to Him, when saying no would have been easier, safer, more comfortable? When was the last time you surrendered your will completely, knowing it might cost you everything you've worked for, everyone you love, every comfort you've built? Because here's what most people will never tell you. Here's the secret that separates the chosen from the comfortable. Obedience is the language God speaks fluently, and when you obey, even when it doesn't make sense, you don't just please God, you move His heart. Let me be brutally honest with you. We live in a generation that has watered down obedience. We've made it optional. We've turned God's commands into suggestions. We pick and choose what we want to follow, based on what feels good, what's convenient, what doesn't require sacrifice. We say we love God, but we live like we're in charge. And then we wonder why our prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. Why breakthrough seems so far away. Why we feel spiritually stagnant. John 14:15 cuts straight through all the religious noise. Jesus says it plain, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Not, "If you love me, think about my commandments." Not, "If you love me, keep the ones you agree with." If you love me, keep them. Period. Obedience isn't a recommendation. It's the proof of love. It's the evidence that your faith isn't just words, it's action. But let's go deeper. Because obedience isn't easy. If it were, everyone would do it. Obedience requires something most people aren't willing to give total surrender. It means laying down your plans, your pride, your need to be right. It means trusting God, even when His instructions make zero sense. It means walking when you can't see the path. It means standing when everyone tells you to sit down. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave everything: his home, his family, his security. Genesis 12:1 says, "The Lord had said to Abram, 'Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to a land I will show you.'" Notice what God didn't say. He didn't tell Abraham where he was going. He didn't give him a map. He didn't promise it would be easy. He just said, "Go." And Abraham went. That's obedience. Blind faith wrapped in complete trust. But it didn't stop there. Years later, after God finally gave Abraham the son he'd been promised, God tested him again. Genesis 22:2 records the unthinkable command, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." Can you imagine the son Abraham waited decades for? The miracle child, the fulfillment of God's promise. And now, God was asking him to sacrifice that very son. Everything in Abraham's humanity must have screamed, "This doesn't make sense." But Abraham didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He didn't demand an explanation. He obeyed. And Genesis 22:12 records God's response, "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham's obedience touched God's heart so deeply that God didn't just bless him. He made him the father of nations. But here's what you have to understand. The blessing didn't come before the obedience. It came because of it. God doesn't reward intention. He rewards action. Now, look at Jesus, fully God, fully man. In the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what was ahead, the betrayal, the beating, the cross, he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. Even Jesus wrestled with obedience. Even Jesus felt the weight of surrender. But he chose God's will over his own comfort. And that obedience, that submission, that willingness to go to the cross, it redeemed all of humanity. The greatest act of love in history was birthed from the hardest act of obedience. So let me ask you something that's going to pierce your soul. What has God been asking you to do that you've been putting off? What door has He told you to walk through that you've been avoiding? What relationship has He told you to release that you're still holding on to? What calling has He placed on your life that you've been making excuses about? Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Your disobedience doesn't just affect you. It affects everyone you're meant to impact. Every day you delay obedience is a day someone doesn't receive their breakthrough. Every moment you choose comfort over conviction is a moment destiny waits. God has already prepared the blessing, but He's waiting for you to step into it through obedience. Obedience is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of faith. It's saying, God, I'm terrified, but I trust you more than I trust my fear. It's stepping into the unknown because you know who holds tomorrow. It's releasing what you can see to receive what you can't. And when you do that, when you choose obedience over ease, something shifts in heaven. Your obedience becomes a sweet fragrance before God. Ephesians 5:2 says Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Your obedience carries that same aroma. It rises to the throne room. It touches God's heart, and He smiles. He sees you, He knows you, and He's proud of you. Not because you're perfect, not because you have it all figured out, but because when He said move, you moved. When He said trust, you trusted. When He said let go, you released. That obedience, that willingness to follow even when it costs you, that's what makes God's heart swell with satisfaction. So right now, I want you to do something. Think about one moment when you chose obedience over comfort. One time when you said yes to God, even though it terrified you. Drop that moment in the comments. Share your story, because someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know they're not alone in their struggle to obey. But here's where we're headed next. Because obedience doesn't just please God, it activates something in the spiritual realm that most people never experience. And what I'm about to show you is going to change everything you thought you knew about divine favor. Have you ever wondered if anything you've done actually mattered? Have you ever looked at your life and thought, who have I really helped? What difference have I made? Have you ever felt like your prayers, your faith, your sacrifices disappeared into thin air, invisible, insignificant, forgotten? Let me shatter that lie right now. Because what you don't see with your natural eyes is exploding in the spiritual realm. Every prayer you whispered in the dark, every act of kindness you showed when no one was watching, every moment you chose faith over fear, every time you stood for truth when it cost you something, none of it, and I mean none of it, was wasted. Here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Your obedience creates waves. Massive, unstoppable waves that crash into shores you'll never visit, touch lives you'll never meet, change futures you'll never see. You think you're just living your life doing your best, trying to honor God. But heaven sees something entirely different. Heaven sees a warrior whose every step of faith sends shockwaves through the kingdom of darkness. Matthew 13:31-32 gives us a picture that most people read but never truly understand. Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds yet, when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that the birds come and perch in its branches." Did you catch that? The smallest seed, the one that looks insignificant, the one people overlook. That seed becomes a tree, so large it provides shelter for everything around it. That's you. Every act of faith you've sown, even the ones that felt small, the ones nobody applauded, the ones you did in secret, those were seeds. And God has been growing them in ways you can't even fathom. You prayed for someone years ago and forgot about it. But that prayer is still echoing. It's still working. It's still producing fruit. You showed up when you were exhausted. You gave when you had nothing. You spoke life when death surrounded you. And heaven took those moments and multiplied them beyond your wildest imagination. Let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. There are people alive today because you prayed. There are marriages still standing because you interceded. There are children walking in purpose because you sowed into their parents. There are businesses thriving because you spoke blessing over them. You don't see it. You may never hear about it, but it's happening right now, in real time. Your obedience set things in motion that will outlive you. Think about the woman with the alabaster jar in Mark 14. She broke that jar and poured expensive perfume on Jesus' feet. The disciples criticized her, called it wasteful, but Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." One act, extravagant worship. One moment of radical obedience. And it's still being talked about 2,000 years later. That's the ripple effect. That's the power of one person saying yes to God. Now let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many times have you downplayed your impact? How many times have you thought, "I'm just one person. What I do doesn't really matter"? That's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe. Because if he can convince you that your life is insignificant, he can keep you from stepping into the fullness of your calling. But the truth is this: you are not just one person. You are one person connected to an infinite God. And that changes everything. When you pray, you're not just speaking words into the air. You're releasing heaven's authority into earth's atmosphere. When you give, you're not just helping someone temporarily. You're sowing seeds that will harvest for generations. When you worship, you're not just singing songs. You're shifting the spiritual climate around you. You are a conduit of divine power, and every action you take in faith sends ripples into eternity. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Most people give up right before the harvest. They sow and sow and sow, and when they don't see immediate results, they quit. But God's timeline isn't our timeline. His harvest doesn't operate on human schedules. What you planted 5 years ago might be breaking ground today. What you're planting today might feed someone 20 years from now. You don't sow for instant gratification. You sow for eternal impact. Here's the part that should make you weep with gratitude. You're leaving a legacy, not just a financial inheritance, not just a family name, a spiritual legacy. There are people who will never struggle with what you struggled with because you broke generational curses. There are children who will walk in freedom because you chose obedience over compromise. There are communities that will be transformed because you refused to stay silent. Your life, your obedience, your faith, your endurance is a light. And that light doesn't just shine on you, it illuminates everyone around you. 1 Thessalonians 1:8 says, "The Lord's message rang out from you, not only in Macedonia and Achaia. Your faith in God has become known everywhere." Your faith is contagious. It spreads. People are watching you, even when you don't realize it. They see how you handle adversity. They notice how you respond to betrayal. They watch how you worship in the storm. And something shifts inside them. They think, if God can do it for them, maybe He can do it for me. You have no idea how many people have been saved because they saw Jesus in you. How many have returned to faith because your testimony reminded them God is real? How many have found hope because you refused to give up? You're not just living for yourself. You're living for everyone God has assigned to your influence. And that influence is greater than you think. So right now, I want you to think about someone whose life has been impacted by your faith. Someone who's different because you obeyed God. Drop their story in the comments. Not to boast, but to testify. Because your story is someone else's breakthrough. But here's what you need to understand before we move forward. This ripple effect you've been creating, it's not finished. In fact, what God is about to do next is going to multiply everything you've sown. And the harvest that's coming is going to leave you speechless. How much longer do you think you'll have to wait before God finally shows up? How many more prayers do you need to pray before heaven responds to your cry? How many more years of faithfulness? How many more sacrifices? How many more battles do you have to endure before you see the reward you've been promised? Here's what I'm about to tell you, and I need you to hear this with every fiber of your being. Your waiting is over. Your testing season is closing. And the vindication you've been crying out for is about to manifest in ways that will leave you speechless. God has seen every sacrifice. He has counted every tear. He has recorded every moment you chose Him when the world offered you easier options. And He's been preparing something so magnificent, so overwhelming, so beyond your comprehension that when it arrives, you'll fall to your knees and weep with gratitude. Not because you earned it, but because He promised it. And God never breaks His promises. Hebrews 10:36 declares, "You need to persevere, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised." Notice it doesn't say if you receive. It says when. It's not a possibility. It's a certainty. The only question is whether you'll hold on long enough to see it. And here's what the enemy has been trying to do. He's been whispering in your ear, "It's never going to happen. You've waited too long. God forgot about you." But that's a lie straight from the pit of hell. God doesn't forget. God doesn't delay without purpose. And what's coming for you has been worth every single second of the wait. Think about Job, a man who lost everything. His children, his wealth, his health. His own wife told him to curse God and die. His friends accused him of secret sins. For months, maybe years, Job sat in ashes, scraping his boils, crying out to a God who seemed silent. But Job 42 records what happened next. God didn't just restore what Job lost, he doubled it. Job 42:10 says, "The Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before." Twice as much. Not barely enough. Not just what was taken. Double. That's how God vindicates. He doesn't give you back what the enemy stole. He multiplies it so severely that everyone who doubted you has to admit God's hand is on your life. Now think about David, anointed as king while still a teenager. But did he step into the throne immediately? No. He spent years running for his life, hiding in caves, dodging spears thrown by a jealous king, betrayed by people he trusted. There were moments when David could have taken the kingdom by force. Moments when he could have killed Saul and seized power. But he didn't. He waited. He trusted God's timing. And when the moment finally came, when David was crowned king, nobody could question it. Nobody could say he manipulated his way to the top. His vindication was divine, undeniable, and absolute. So let me ask you something that's going to pierce your soul. What if God has been delaying your breakthrough, not because he's withholding it, but because he's perfecting it? What if every closed door, every no, every setback was God protecting you from something that would have destroyed you? What if he's been positioning you for something so powerful that premature promotion would have crushed you under the weight of it? See, most people want the blessing without the process. They want the crown without the wilderness. They want the testimony without the test. But that's not how God operates with his chosen ones. He doesn't hand you a kingdom and hope you figure it out. He trains you in obscurity. He refines you in the fire. He teaches you to trust him when everything around you is falling apart. Because when the vindication comes, and it is coming, you'll be strong enough to steward it. Here's what's about to happen. Doors that have been locked for years are about to swing open. Opportunities you stopped praying for are about to appear out of nowhere. Relationships that seem dead are about to resurrect. Finances that have been stagnant are about to overflow. And the people who counted you out, who wrote you off, who said you'd never make it, they're about to watch in stunned silence as God elevates you in front of their eyes. Isaiah 54:17 promises, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn." This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Every lie spoken over you, condemned. Every accusation hurled at you silenced. Every attack designed to destroy you failed. Because when God vindicates, he doesn't just clear your name, he establishes your legacy. But here's what you need to understand. This vindication isn't happening because you're perfect. It's happening because you've been faithful. You didn't quit when quitting made sense. You didn't walk away when everyone else would have. You kept showing up. You kept believing. You kept trusting, and God saw it every single moment. And he's about to reward you so abundantly that people will ask what happened to them, and you'll point to heaven and say God happened. Psalm 37:6 says, "He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun." Not hidden, not subtle, bold, bright, undeniable. Everyone is going to see it. Not because you're bragging, but because God is making a statement. He's proving that those who trust Him, those who endure, those who remain faithful, they will be honored. Publicly, powerfully, permanently. So right now, I need you to do something. I need you to declare with me, I am ready to step into my season of reward. Say it out loud. Feel it in your spirit. Type, I am ready in the comments below. Because this isn't just a statement, it's a spiritual activation. You're aligning yourself with what heaven is releasing. You're opening your hands to receive what's already been prepared. But listen to me carefully. This vindication, this reward, this supernatural favor that's about to flood your life, it's not the end. It's the beginning. Because what God is about to do next is going to blow your mind. And the final piece of this puzzle is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss.